presenting on the beginning and the end, a comparison of negotiation preparation and outcomes in finance.
Good morning, everyone. How many of you have kids? How many of you were kids at one point in your life? Think back to how you negotiated, for an extra scoop of ice cream or the latest new toy. How dynamic was that process? How quickly were you willing to adapt to get with the changing circumstances? And how far did you go to get the outcome you desired? Compare that with how you negotiate now. Is it more or less dynamic? Because the social norms begin to dictate how we interact with each other. We tend to lose some of that dynamic. How does that affect outcomes? How does it affect our satisfaction with outcomes? That's kind of where my exploration began. And I looked at negotiations as a series of decisions, and specifically focused on the beginning, which is the preparation process, and the end, the outcomes, to see if there was any sort of correlation between the two. I chose to focus on finance and commercial real estate, because that's the world I live in, and as such I can access key decision makers within the system who could provide me with rich data for my company. Logistically, it was great. Secondly, the negotiation itself has a very high value in commercial real estate, because number one, there's illiquidity in the market. So if we make mistakes with regards to valuations, it's very difficult to fix them. Number two, commercial real estate products are notoriously difficult to value. This is because investor sentiment plays a major role. It's not just numbers, actual thought process and feelings actually do matter. Number three, there's an element of homophily that takes place. The market itself is stratified, and experienced firms won't deal with other experienced firms, and other firms the same size, place, stature, what have you. So it's limited, and how you interact in one negotiation has a domino effect in future negotiations as well. So this is the conflict map as I looked at it. If we basically split it down the middle, you have the buy side and the sell side, and essentially you have two hubs on either side, or one hub on either side, which is the decision maker. All information within the company flows to that decision maker, who then communicates with the other side. That's facilitated by the investment banker and the broker, sometimes both, sometimes neither. And the whole process is basically framed by external factors like the investors who are involved in the company, regulatory bodies like the SEC, franchisors, vendors, what have you. So I chose a phenomenological study to really try and understand the experience behind negotiations, or to understand the experience of negotiations in commercial real estate. I interviewed decision makers in commercial real estate firms, brokers, senior executives, and investment banks, to try and get a real rich data sampling of the process itself from a number of different perspectives. And then once I had done that, I tried to organize that based on the theories and models associated with coordinated management of meaning. The first one I used was the loop model, which focuses on narratives that take place below the surface of the negotiation itself. Stories unheard, untold, unknown, untellable, that really sort of influence and drive the process forward. Similarly, the Daisy model focuses on conversations. If we think about negotiations in real estate, we often think about the fact that it's between a buyer and a seller. But if we actually think about it, there's so many other conversations that are taking place simultaneously on either side that affect how that side interacts on the table. So, for example, if you're buying your first house, you may not only be negotiating with your counterpart on the other side, but you may also be negotiating with your bank to organize your lending or your financing. You may be negotiating with your parents to help you with their down payment. You may be negotiating with your significant other because she doesn't like the house as much as you do. All of these things, all of these factors come into play when you're at the table and you're actually negotiating with the person. Once I had organized that, I looked at the process through a number of theoretical lenses, basically from three schools of thought: negotiation theory, decision-making theory, and social psychology, to try and see how I could interpret that and come up with some sort of conclusion that we could potentially start working on. So the process itself, what did we find out? What we found out was that the negotiation process, the preparation process in commercial real estate is actually pretty intensive. It takes anywhere between 1 and 3 months, and but the only thing is, it's completely content-based for the most part. So the focus and primary goal is to gather, analyze data, and create financial models that basically are used to either justify our position or refute our counterparts. And as such, investor sentiment and the thought process behind that is not really addressed. So even at this high level, negotiations tend to take on more of the dynamic of bargaining. And when either party enters the negotiation itself, they have a pretty good understanding of what the end game is going to look like. And as a result, they know what the conclusions are going to be, but they're not sure how to actually get there, or how to change that, because they're somewhat unhappy with those outcomes. So, the goal of the intervention then becomes to change the scope and nature of the negotiation preparation process to account for investor sentiment based on the multiple frameworks and concepts associated with social psychology, communication, decision-making, and negotiation. By doing this, we would create a more holistic and dynamic preparation process that would provide decision-makers with greater options within the negotiation itself, introducing a certain amount of flexibility and dynamism that's missing. We would do this by having a three-stage process of the intervention itself. The first stage would be to engage the investment bank, and then through the investment bank, engage their clients, the commercial real estate firm. At each stage, the training, which would be a 2-day workshop, would be supported by a software program that's a user-friendly checklist process of 15 to 20 minutes that reinforces the tenets of the training program itself. The idea here is that we're changing behavior. Changing behavior takes time. And as such, there needs to be something that supports and creates a positive feedback loop through experiential and observational learning to ensure that the change that we're creating is sustainable. So, the training program itself, how are we going to engage the hierarchical league? Because this is a hierarchical system, and as such, how do we get in contact with the investment bank to make them interested? The profit motive. The goal of the training program itself is to create content based on non-performing relationships. So those relationships that are not performing right now, in some way, shape, or form, have either reached a stalemate or that have either completely fallen off track and are feel quote-unquote irreparable. By looking at those, we create course content that's based on live cases that are currently in progress, and as such, can create an immediate return on investment or create an immediate value to the investment bank itself. This allows us to demonstrate and quantify the influence of the process by measuring the differences in those relationships themselves. And as such, again, goes back to that idea of reinforcing usage, because through this experience of actually seeing a positive result, the trainees will have a desire to use the software more and more. So again, to facilitate that process, we create a strong monitoring and evaluation process through the training program on 2 levels. One, the training program itself will have a questionnaire and survey, and the second, the software itself will be tracking to see exactly how it's creating changes. The idea here, again, is to create and support feedback loops that form to support that change itself. Again, the key here is bridging qualitative data, qualitative process to create quantitative, measurable results. That's the big thing, that bridges that gap and increases usage and helps build links between the investment bank itself and their clients. That's the primary focus I wanted to look at, because the investment bank is, in many ways, very important in the whole process, because they are the bridge between the two parties. And so this is what the maps would look like pre-intervention and post-intervention. As you can see, pre-intervention, primarily all information is staying within and the linkages are within the firm itself. And as a result, the investment bank is unable to get accurate information and advise accurately. On the flip side, after the intervention, there's much more linkages that allow for adaptability and more sustainability. And the information flow to be more accurate and consistent. I'll end by basically referring to Michael Jordan, Cristiano Ronaldo, Roger Federer. All talk about their ability to be creative during the game itself, as being a result of how well they're prepared in the fundamentals. That's similarly, think about as a child, your ability to be creative in those negotiations was due to the fact that you were so comfortable with your counterparts. Same situation here. This intervention is trying to build that certain level of comfort with the counterparts, incorporate investor sentiment into the process, and as a result, create a better, more sustainable system thereafter. Questions?
Open up for questions, comments? Yes, Karen?
How big was your sample?
I interviewed about 6 people. I interviewed investment bankers, brokers, and then about 3 decision makers within the commercial estate. Yes.
What are your thoughts as far as, this is really interesting, thank you. What do you think the opportunity is to change the behavior, to have that entree to actually have an influence in this? Whether it's in a single firm or,
Sure.
I'm guessing you could do it across a much wider range.
Well, I think that's one of the things that I thought about, Rolla. I mean, is there an element of rightness in the system itself right now? Are they wanting to change? And you can make a very strong argument that that's really not the case with the Dow Jones Industrial reaching all-time highs on a daily basis. But I think the effects and the consequences of 2007 and 2008 are still felt. And as such, there is a desire within the market to realize and create a more sustainable world. Because everybody realizes that, again, like I said, there's a certain amount of finiteness with regards to how many function in the market. And as such, as you're interacting, there seems to be a desire to say, okay, we know this process, but can it get better? And I think that has to be the primary tenet of the intervention as well. We're not telling you what you're doing is not right. You're very successful in what you do. But there's a way to make it better and more sustainable. Yes,
Tell us a little bit more about why you chose technology.
sure. I mean, I went back and forth between doing a case study specifically and then a phenomenological study. And I chose the latter primarily because of the fact that I really felt like, again, one of the big concerns that we have is that we live in a quantitative world, and as such, we don't spend a lot of time dealing with the qualitative aspects of what we do. And as such, I wanted to really sort of focus on our experience, really try and see exactly what people were thinking and how they felt, whether they felt happy with the way it was going, and what specifically within that process were they either happy or unhappy with. And that's why the reason why I thought that would give me sort of a richer, wider sort of net of information that I could draw from and sort of pick and choose the patterns with it. Yes, sir.
Is this the ubiquitous formula in this case for many different cultures and places in the world that you take into consideration cultural differences?
Yes and no. That is, obviously with time constraints and whatnot, I couldn't really sort of expand it, and that's something that I do recommend in terms of further research. I do feel like the principal concepts and theories would be applicable across the board, but again, due to time constraints, I focused on a very small, specific sample in a specific answer.
So there is room to expand your
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if you started to think about what software you would use for this. Is it something that would be in the cloud, web OS, or is it something that would be maybe localized to like a mobile platform?
We're exploring multiple avenues with that. The idea, of course, is to create something that's extremely user-friendly and sort of becomes accessible in a very time-constrained world. And that reinforces what we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, it's difficult for us to keep going back to books and great theory that's out there, but it's not accessible. So this particular software, whether it's through a cloud pattern or whether it's through a more mobile app or what have you, if whatever allows us to condense that information in a very sort of user-friendly way, that's what we're looking at.
And then the second question would be, once you have the software deployed, is this software for sale, or is this something that you would make